The harsh morning light of Metropolis Grove sliced through the grime on the windows of the rundown warehouse district, illuminating the frail figure huddled beneath a stack of salvaged cardboard. This was William Jones, a man whose personal net worth was estimated by global finance publications to be nearly $20 billion. The silent orchestrator of Sterling Capital Holdings, a financial behemoth that spanned 4 continents. Yet, here he was, shivering, his face obscured by a thick, matted beard and a sweat-stained baseball cap. His designer clothes swapped for a threadbare, oversized cap. William, who recently turned 50, had returned to the city he had built and quietly ruled for one singular purpose: to assess the heart of the woman his only son, John Johnson, intended to marry. John, at 32, was a rising star in his own right, heading up Sterling Tech Solutions, a highly lucrative division of the family enterprise. But William feared his ambition had eclipsed his judgment in matters of the heart. William had been observing John and his fiancée, Elizabeth Jones, for 3 weeks. Elizabeth, a woman of 29, was an exemplar of polished East Coast society. Her family's name, a veneer of old money, currently stretched thin. The official engagement announcement was scheduled for the coming month, but William's private investigation had yielded unsettling results. A pattern of calculated maneuvering and callous disregard for anyone outside their immediate social circle. He needed confirmation, the cold, hard truth visible only when the veil of wealth was completely stripped away. He would test them as an individual utterly devoid of power, a burden, a complication. His first attempt was strategically placed outside the towering marble and glass facade of the Van Sohn boutique, where Elizabeth was currently selecting her custom wedding gown with a retinue of attendants. William stumbled, managing to catch himself with a theatrical groan, dropping a worn shopping bag filled only with crumpled newspapers. He waited, feigning a dizzy spell, his hand outstretched to the passing patrons. Elizabeth emerged, draped in ivory silk, her face momentarily softening as she caught sight of John waiting at the curb. Her expression hardened instantly upon noticing William sprawled near the entrance. "Ooh, John, look at that!" Elizabeth's voice, usually a carefully modulated murmur, rose with a sharp, disdainful edge. "The management here is atrocious. Do they even bother to clear out the refuse anymore? It's completely ruining the aesthetic. Call the doorman, please. Or better yet, call security." John, preoccupied with a quick business call, glanced over, his jaw tightening only slightly. "Just ignore him, Liz. We'll be in the car in a second." "Sleeping? No, John. He's low. And he smells... Honestly, my father just sank a cool $500,000 into renovating this facade, and I will not have this filth touching it. I mean, look at him. He's clearly trying to cause a scene to shake us down for a few measly dollars." She gave William a look of intense revulsion, stepping well around him as if avoiding toxic waste before sweeping into the waiting black sedan. John ended his call with a sigh, tossing a single $5 bill onto the pavement without meeting William's eyes, and then slid into the driver's seat. The observation confirmed William's worst fears. John, though not actively cruel, was passively indifferent, and Elizabeth possessed a streak of cold contempt. He collected the bill, a bitter metallic taste in his mouth. A few days later, the corporate world William had temporarily abandoned began to spin out of control. His old rival, David Miller, a man who harbored a decades-long vendetta against William for a disastrous business deal, had caught wind of William's sudden, unexplained disappearance from his usual circuits. David, sharp-eyed and opportunistic at 50, immediately started spreading rumors that William was either gravely ill, mentally unstable, or perhaps even in hiding due to massive financial insolvency. David subtly leveraged his own connections to the Sterling board, suggesting he was the only suitable candidate to temporarily manage Sterling Capital Holdings and, by extension, John's division in William's absence. At a high-profile industry mixer, David approached Elizabeth and John, his face a mask of solemn concern. "John, my boy, your father's sudden vanishing act is creating significant turbulence. The board is nervous. I've taken it upon myself to offer some advisory support to your mother." Elizabeth, immediately recognizing the shift in power, adjusted her strategy with practiced speed. She began showering David with attention, subtly implying that John was equally concerned about his father's instability and that David's strong, authoritative presence was precisely what the family needed. She even began using the term Uncle David in hushed tones, positioning him as a surrogate father-in-law, a man far more suitable to preside over the kind of family empire she envisioned. John, focused on the immediate stabilization of his company's stock value. Tolerated the charade, seeing David's involvement as a necessary evil to project stability. The pressure mounted quickly. The media picked up on the rumors, and the first major turning point arrived during an unexpected blackout in a bustling commercial area. Mary Smith, a 28-year-old firefighter with the Metropolis Grove Fire Department, was just finishing her shift and heading toward her modest apartment a few blocks away. Mary was known for her quiet efficiency and a reputation for treating every emergency, regardless of how minor, with absolute diligence. She was off duty, wearing jeans and a simple department t-shirt. William, seeing his opportunity, staged a more precarious situation. He waited until the fire alarm, triggered by a minor electrical surge from the blackout, began to blare in a small, crowded coffee shop. He then moved swiftly, placing himself directly in the path of the panicked crowd trying to evacuate, feigning a genuine collapse, clutching his chest dramatically and deliberately falling in a tight, awkward space near the doorway. People shrieked and leaped over him, focused only on escape. Mary, hearing the frantic sounds and seeing the jam at the exit, rushed toward the source. She saw the blockage, a heap of old clothes, and a struggling man, ignored by the flow of people. Without a moment's hesitation, she knelt down amidst the rush, pushing back against the torrent of escaping customers with a calm authority. "Clear the lane. Someone's down. Move. Are you breathing?" Mary's voice was sharp, professional, cutting through the general panic. She checked William's pulse with practiced ease, disregarding the stench in the grime. She didn't see a homeless man. She saw a patient, a casualty of the chaos. I can't breathe. My chest," William gasped, giving a performance worthy of an Oscar. "Okay, don't panic." Mary expertly leveraged her shoulder, pulling William's surprisingly light frame out of the bottleneck and into the relative safety of the sidewalk. She secured him in the recovery position, her hand on his back, offering calm, steady assurance until a slow-moving ambulance eventually arrived. She provided the paramedics with a concise, accurate assessment, waited until William was loaded into the rig, and only then, as the noise faded, did she finally wipe the sweat from her own brow and continue on her way home, her face registering only professional fatigue. She never once asked for money, nor did she comment on his appearance. She simply performed her duty. William, now lying comfortably if disguised on a hospital bed and observed only by a nurse who had dismissed the old bum as a case of minor exhaustion, allowed a genuine smile to touch his lips. The test was simple, the result profound. Elizabeth saw trash. Mary saw humanity. He thought about the vast, empty space in John's life that his future wife was supposed to fill, and realized the kind of emptiness Elizabeth would perpetuate. Mary Smith was the antithesis of everything he feared for his son's future. The conflict between the world John was choosing and the world his father wanted for him was now clearly defined. William knew the path ahead would be fraught with emotional landmines, as he needed to dismantle John's current life while elevating Mary's. The game had just begun, and the stakes were nothing less than his son's soul. He needed to proceed with caution, the next steps involving a much deeper and more disruptive level of engagement with Mary. He would need to be vulnerable, exposed, and most importantly, he would need to be defended. He closed his eyes, already plotting the next confrontation. The financial world was about to experience a calculated seismic shock, orchestrated by a man everyone believed was powerless. The true battle for John's future was set to ignite. William, having narrowly avoided a full medical examination that would have exposed his meticulously crafted disguise, discharged himself from the emergency room early the next morning. He spent the following week conducting his shadow campaign, meticulously observing Mary Smith. He learned about her life, the demanding schedule of a Metropolis Grove firefighter, the quiet dedication to her neighborhood, and the palpable absence of material ambition in her sparse, clean apartment. She lived a life of service, a stark contrast to the sterile opulence that defined the Sterling and Vance families. He noted that her late father, a retired police captain, had left her a small, dilapidated commercial property, a former storefront that she was slowly and single-handedly attempting to convert into a community center for at-risk youth. This small, struggling project became William's new focal point for the second, deeper test: loyalty in the face of immense pressure and injustice. The setup was elaborate, leveraging his still-hidden control over municipal bureaucracy and local development committees. William, again in his guise as the vagrant, appeared at Mary's rundown property, feigning an interest in the construction work. Mary, though surprised by his presence, spoke to him patiently, explaining her vision. That evening, however, the real chaos erupted. Mary's building was suddenly served with an emergency eviction notice, a fabricated notice citing insurmountable safety violations and immediate demolition orders. It was a vicious, unappealable attack designed to crush her life's work. William watched from the shadows as Mary, weary from a double shift, arrived home to find the large yellow notice taped over the door and a small crew of municipal workers already beginning to fence off the property. She was devastated, but her firefighter's training instilled a sense of controlled reaction. She didn't cry or scream. She immediately started making calls. When she finally contacted the appropriate city department, the answer she received was cold and final. The decision came from a powerful, influential news source on the urban development board of source linked to Sterling Capital, and specifically to the new acting advisor, David Miller. The injustice was staggering, designed to make her feel entirely powerless. William timed his approach perfectly, shuffling up to her as she stood by the police tape, arguing futilely with a hard-nosed, low-level manager. "It's no use," Miss Fuian mumbled, pulling a thermal blanket tighter around his shoulders. "When the big money talks, pale plea like us, we just lose." Mary turned to him, her eyes redrimmed with exhaustion, but her voice was firm. "No, I'm a civil servant. I save lives. I don't run from a fight, and I certainly don't run from bullies. This is wrong. I poured every penny, every free hour into this." At that moment, John and Elizabeth pulled up in a sleek, customized SUV, having been alerted by a frantic John S. mother about the embarrassing PR situation related to the family name being dragged into a city dispute. Elizabeth Jones, in a chic evening dress, immediately took charge, seeing an opportunity to play the gracious heiress, Elizabeth purred, stepping over a discarded piece of lumber. Elizabeth, John is Johnny's fiancée. This whole thing is just a silly, bureaucratic snafu. My dear Uncle David is clearing up some of William Sterling's old messes. And unfortunately, your little project got caught in the crossfire. We're very generous, though. John and I will personally write you a check for $80,000. Take it, walk away, and please keep our family name out of the headlines. John remained silent, checking his phone nervously, visibly uncomfortable, but prioritizing the quick closure of the problem over the moral cost. He was torn between his duty to the family's public image and a faint, nagging sense of what was right. Mary looked from the crisp, pristine check in Elizabeth's hand to the furious, silent disappointment in William's eyes, who was watching intently. She felt the choice acutely, the comfortable, easy escape, or the lonely, impossible fight. "Keep your money, Miss Jones," Mary said, pushing the check away with the back of her hand. Her voice was steady, infused with the quiet strength of a person who has made peace with hardship. "This isn't about money. It's about principle. This building is for the community, not my retirement, and I will not be bought out by a corporation whose morality is as thin as that silk scarf you re-wearing." Elizabeth gasped dramatically, stepping back as if struck. "John, did you hear that? The nerve. She's actively rejecting a handout for a bum in a broken-down building." John, finally forced to speak, rubbed his temples. "Mary, listen to me. This isn't how things work. You can't win this fight. Just take the money. Don't make this any harder for yourself. The people behind this, they are powerful." Mary's gaze fixed on John, but her words were directed at William. "Some things are more valuable than a paycheck, Mr. Jones. You can be standing tall, wearing rags, and still be the most decent man in the city." This single act of integrity, witnessed by the disguised William, shattered his remaining doubt. This was the woman who had the strength to anchor John's soul. Over the next few days, David Miller, now firmly entrenched as the savior of Sterling Capital, ramped up the pressure. He used his temporary authority to freeze John's personal accounts and threatened to revoke the funding for Sterling Tech Solutions unless John officially severed all ties with his unstable father and proceeded immediately with the engagement to Elizabeth. David subtly fabricated evidence that William was suffering from a debilitating mental illness and had squandered hundreds of millions of company money before he vanished. At a tense board meeting, John reluctantly agreed to David's demands. A moment of profound emotional collapse, disguised by a steely corporate veneer. He felt the weight of the company, the hundreds of employees, and the demands of the Vance family crushing his sense of filial loyalty. I have to choose stability. David, I have to protect the company. My father is gone, and if he's not, he's made his choices. Meanwhile, Mary Smith, the lone voice of protest, faced an internal review at the fire department, fabricated charges of gross insubordination and ethical violations, all traced back, indirectly, to pressure from the Sterling Group. Her lifelong dream was crumbling under the weight of corporate malice. She found herself standing alone against the combined forces of Metropolitan Grove's elite, with only the old, ragged William for support. William, who, as the vagrant John Smith, offered to run errands, buy her cheap coffee, and simply sit beside her in silence outside the locked gate of her beloved property. One evening, after the last appeal was denied, Mary sat on a curb, exhausted, resigned. William approached her, his voice rough but sincere. "Why, miss, why do you keep fighting? You've lost your property. You might lose your job." Mary looked at him, her eyes tired but clear. "Because, John, I swore an oath, not just to the department, but to myself, to help the helpless, to run toward the fire, not away from it. And right now, principle is on fire. You told me I couldn't win. Maybe I won't. But I won't let them burn down what I believe in without a fight. And besides," she reached out and squeezed his arm, a brief, firm touch. "You're still here, John. You're the only decent person who hasn't abandoned me." This single gesture, this unwavering loyalty to a man everyone else dismissed, settled it. William knew that the emotional turning point had arrived. John had made his worst decision, choosing corporate survival over familial and moral truth. Mary had made her best, choosing human decency over personal ruin. The time for the grand corporate spectacle was at hand. He would have to let the world see the true depth of the deception and the immense quality of the woman they had all dismissed. The stage was set for the final, brutal confrontation. A banquet where the masks would fall and the truth, in all its $20 billion glory, would finally set the record straight. The climax was set for a lavish black tie gala at the opulent Pinnacle Heights, a venue known for hosting the city's most significant power moves. The event, ironically billed as the Sterling succession ceremony, was orchestrated by David Miller and Elizabeth's father, Marcus Vance. Its dual purpose, to formally recognize David as John's mentor and guardian of Sterling capital, and to announce the accelerated engagement of John and Elizabeth Jones. This was the moment of ultimate power for David and Elizabeth, and the absolute humiliation of the missing William Jones. William, having shaved and dressed in a simple, custom-tailored suit that whispered power, rather than shouting it, arrived at the venue precisely at 8 p.m., accompanied by Mary Smith, who wore a modest yet elegant navy drista, only one she owned suitable for such an event. William still looked different. The beard was gone, but the humility remained, creating an aura that was intensely unnerving to those who thought they knew him. The moment they walked through the door, the murmurs began. David Miller and Marcus Vance immediately intercepted them, their faces contorted with fury. "Who let this riffraff in here? And you, John Smith, the vagrant from the news." "Security removed them," David bellowed, his voice echoing over the hushed crowd. William merely smiled, a slow, predatory expression. "Defile David." Elizabeth approached, her eyes cold with spite, clutching John Johnson's arm. "Mary, you really have no shame, following this pathetic old man into a private event. Get out before security is forced to drag you out." John, standing stiffly in his tuxedo, looked at Mary, then at William, his face a mask of internal conflict. "Dad, ... if it is you, ... you need to go. You're ruining everything. David is stabilizing the company." William ignored John completely. His eyes were locked on David Miller. "David, you've enjoyed your little game. You've convinced my son and the board I'm incompetent, or deceased. You've orchestrated the financial ruin of this decent young woman who dared to challenge your corruption. It's time to settle the score." David laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. "You have nothing, William. You are an obsolete relic. I control the funds, the board, and soon, your son." "What do you have?" "I have the truth," William stated, pulling out a slim satellite phone and making a single, decisive call. The conversation was brief, highly technical, and utterly baffling to those nearby, involving stock swaps, global wire transfers, and the immediate freezing of several offshore accounts. Within 3 minutes, the lights in the grand hall dimmed, and the massive video screen intended for the engagement announcement suddenly displayed a live feed. On the screen was Senator Matthew Gonzalez, the powerful former governor and longtime ally of William Sterling. "Good evening, Metropolis Grove." Senator Gonzalez's image addressed the shocked room. "I'm issuing this statement at the request of my esteemed mentor, William Jones, chairman of Sterling Capital Holdings, effective immediately. All corporate actions taken by David Miller are null and void. Mr. Miller has been operating under false pretenses. The emergency funding, the development board orders, and the attempted asset seizures, including the vile attack on Ms. A collective gasp swept through the hall. David Miller screamed, "Lies. It's a recorded message," the senator continued, his voice firm. "William Jones has asked me to emphasize one point. Sterling Capital Holdings is an $80 billion empire. John Johnson's division, Sterling Tech Solutions, is valued at $400 million. This event was a test." The screen cut to black. William straightened his tie, the quiet confidence radiating from him now an overwhelming force. "The real William Jones doesn't need to ask permission to enter his own home, David." He gestured toward a team of federal agents who had just silently entered the room. David, Marcus Vance, and Elizabeth's father were escorted away, their power evaporating instantly. John stood paralyzed, watching his fiancée and her family being led out in handcuffs. He finally stumbled forward, falling to his knees before William. "Dad, I didn't know. I was under so much pressure. I had to choose the company. I failed you." William looked down at him, his face etched with a deep, crushing sorrow. "You chose a $400 million future, John, over your father, who offered you the world, and over a woman who offered you a soul." Before John could respond, a sudden, brutal attack occurred. David Miller's estranged, volatile son, James, who had been lurking near the service entrance, rushed John in a frenzy of misguided retaliation, brandishing a broken champagne flute. He screamed, "You took my father's life." John, still on his knees, saw the flash of glass aimed at William. Reacting purely on instinct, a flicker of the filial loyalty William had sought, John threw himself forward, shoving William clear. The shard of glass plunged into John's side, below the ribcage, causing him to collapse with a choked cry. Mary, the firefighter, reacted immediately. She was kneeling over John before anyone else moved, tearing off a section of her dress to staunch the gushing wound, her paramedic training taking over. William watched, horrified, the sight of his son's sacrifice washing away his cold anger. In the hospital waiting room the next morning, William sat beside Mary. John's injury was severe but not fatal. "He saved me, Mary. After everything, he chose me." Mary, exhausted, nodded. He reacted on instinct. "Sir." "And you," William said, his voice thick with emotion. "You saw a vagrant, a criminal, a lost cause, and you saved him. Not once, but 3 times." He reached into his suit jacket and pulled out a small, metallic object, a key to the community property. "The demolition order is cancelled. The property is yours, debt-free, with a fully funded trust for its construction and operation. I owe you more than money, Mary Smith." "I just did my job, sir," she said quietly. "Your job is to run toward the fire." "And you did," William agreed, a proud smile finally breaking through his resolve. "John will be a better man for knowing you, and he will fight for you. And when he recovers, I will host the grandest wedding Metropolis Grove has ever seen." Mary looked at the key, then at William, finally allowing herself a small, hopeful smile. The path had been excruciating, but she had chosen correctly. She had chosen humanity, and in doing so, she had won an empire.